Before motorcades and takeout, supper in the White House meant corn cakes, chowder, barbecue, and pies, made with whatever was at hand. These meals carried presidents through crises, campaigns, and quiet family tables, leaving history you can taste. Here are 25 forgotten presidential favorites no one makes anymore. 1. George Washington. Hoecakes with honey cornmeal meets a hot griddle and turns into thin, lacy cakes that hold a shine of local honey. The batter is simple and quick, poured onto cast iron and flipped once when the edges lift. Served hot with tea, it's the first bite of morning or the last bite after long business. Corn was plentiful on Virginia land. Hives close to the house sweetened the table without extravagance. Nothing fancy, nothing fussy, just a plate that tasted of fields and work. For a man of ceremony, hoecakes were everyday comfort, proof that a leader's steadying ritual could be as humble as warm corn and a thread of honey. The memory isn't gilded, it's practical and human, a breakfast that knew its job and did it well. John Adams. Codfish cakes. Salt cod soaks overnight until the sea lets go, then meets mashed potatoes and onion before being shaped and pan-fried to a crisp, golden edge. The method is New England plain. Squeeze, mix, patty, and sizzle in a skillet until the kitchen smells briny and clean. Potatoes bulked out the precious fish. Cod barrels were common on the Massachusetts coast, a pantry anchor against hard weather. These cakes traveled from wharf to parlor without changing their character. They're thrifty and proud of it, food built for winters that didn't care who you were. For Adams, the plate spoke a familiar dialect, restraint, resourcefulness, a bite of pepper, and a confidence that comes from knowing exactly where your supper came from and why it makes sense. 3. Thomas Jefferson. Macaroni pie. Tubed pasta slides into a bake with cream and cheese until the top freckles and the inside turns soft and rich. The technique arrived from Italian tables to a Virginia sideboard, adapted to what the cellar and dairy could provide. It's a dish that looks formal and eats friendly, a bridge between travels and home. Imported pasta was a curiosity. Cheese and cream were house strengths. The oven did the diplomacy. For Jefferson, macaroni pie wasn't a stunt. It was curiosity turned habit, an idea carried across an ocean and made local by steady hands. Guests remembered the surprise of it. Family remembered the comfort. The meaning rests in that middle ground, refined but familiar, proof that new tastes can become household memories without losing their grace. 4. James Madison. Virginia ham and spoonbread. Thin sliced country ham, smoky and salty, sits beside a soft cornmeal pudding that spoons like a cloud. The ham is cured long and sliced quick. The spoonbread bakes in a buttered dish until the top lifts and trembles. Corn and pork were the twin pillars of Virginia kitchens, leaning on preservation and skill to raise an ordinary evening. The pairing balances itself, edge and softness, salt and mild, ceremony and ease. At Montpelier, it was domestic abundance without show, the kind of plate that steadies talk and softens formality. Shared with Dolly, it reads like a marriage of textures and temperaments, a household rhythm, a table grammar, and a reminder that leadership often begins with what you pass from one plate to the. 5. James Monroe. Oysters on the half-shell. Fresh oysters arrive cold, opened with care and dressed with a little vinegar or lemon to let the brine speak. There's no laboring the point, just a confident shuck, a twist of the wrist, and a platter that smells like tide and wind. The Chesapeake made this possible, sending its quiet luxury upriver and road to state dinners and private suppers alike. Oysters were a sign and a staple, refined enough for guests, common enough for local markets. For Monroe, they linked Virginia to the Atlantic world he navigated, a taste of home that understood diplomacy. The meaning sits right there in the shell. A clean, bright bite that clears the mind, momentarily silences the room and reminds everyone that geography shapes appetite as surely as it shapes history. 6. John Quincy Adams. Indian pudding, cornmeal, molasses, and milk settle into a slow-baked custard that tastes like hearth heat and steady hands. The mixture thickens on the stove, gets a hint of spice, and moves to a brick oven where time does the rest. Nothing flashy, just patience turning pantry staples into comfort. New England kitchens kept cornmeal in barrels, molasses from maritime trade on the shelf, and milk from the cow out back. Together, they made a dessert that fit a frugal, Sabbath-minded household. The pudding came out trembling, its top bronzed, its scent rounding off the edges of a cold day. For Adams, it echoed Puritan roots without sternness, a spoonable nostalgia that reminded him where conviction and restraint first took shape. It was a lesson in enough, simple parts, well managed, delivering warmth that traveled from childhood tables to public life. In a bowl of Indian pudding, the old Yankee logic held, make do, make it good, and let the rest be quiet. 7. Andrew Jackson, leather breeches, dried beans. Green beans strung and hung to dry become leather breeches, rehydrated months later and simmered with a little pork until they taste like summer remembered in winter. The strings once crossed kitchen windows and porch rafters. The pot later filled with beans, salt, onion, and thyme. Dried beans packed easily for travel, kept well in a warm climate, and answered the southern habit of preserving plenty when gardens ran hard. A bit of fatback or ham bone lent depth without expense. The dish landed with a brown broth and soft beans, the kind that soak bread and quiet bellies after work. For Jackson, it recalled a Tennessee farm table, where preserving wasn't nostalgia but necessity, a practice as ordinary as chores and as reliable as morning. The meaning sits in the name, plain, practical, a little rough, yet it fed crowds and didn't complain. Leather breeches were the democraer. 8. Abraham Lincoln, chicken fricassee. One bird makes a meal big enough to matter. Pieces browned lightly, then slipped into a pan sauce that turns thin juices into a gentle gravy, ladled over biscuits to catch every drop. The cooking is careful rather than grand. No waste, no hurry, just a simmer that coaxes tenderness from what's available. Frontier practicality taught that a chicken could stretch across several plates, and flour, stock, and onion could carry the rest. In lean times or long days, fricassee steadied a house with warmth and scent alone. For Lincoln, it was home reduced to essentials: light gravy, soft biscuit, familiar steam rising into a room where talk softened. No one needed a recipe. Memory and method did the work. The dish's meaning comes from that restraint, a comfort that neither denies hardship nor lingers in it, a reminder that a plain supper can hold families together while the world argues outside. It's food that chooses gentleness when gentleness is rare. 9. James Buchanan, cold roast beef and horseradish. Yesterday's roast returns from the pantry cold, sliced thin so the fat turns silky and the lean stays firm, then met with a sharp spoon of horseradish that clears the head. It's a farmhouse habit dressed for a solitary table. Vinegar's bite, bread's ballast, a few pickles if they're handy. Pennsylvania kitchens made smart use of leftovers, and a quiet bachelor's household valued food that kept well and assembled quickly. The method is nothing but order. Slice evenly, season modestly. Let the condiment do the talking. It's not a crowd pleaser by design. It's a personal plate, sufficient and sensible. For Buchanan, this supper matched a reserved temperament and a private routine. The meaning is in the silence between bites. A meal that doesn't perform, that answers hunger without ceremony, that suits a man who returns to papers after the plate is cleared. Cold beef and horseradish speak plainly, strength without swagger, comfort without company. 10. Ulysses S. Grant, rice pudding. Milk, rice, sugar, and a few raisins slide into a baking dish and wait, while heat turns the mixture creamy and the top freckled, a dusting of nutmeg promising a soft finish. It's a barracks memory made gentle, a field comfort recast as home dessert. Soldiers knew the worth of simple sweets when the day's work ran long. Later, the White House kitchen honored that sense of enough. The method stays humble, slow bake, occasional stir, patience at the door. Nothing complex, everything steady. A spoon through the cooled top finds warmth below, and the raisins give little bursts of sweetness like bright notes in a march. For Grant, rice pudding read as modesty after victory, a reminder that relief can be quiet, that celebration doesn't need trumpets, and that the best endings often speak in low voices. It's the kind of dish that asks only for a chair, a clean bowl, and a moment to breathe before tomorrow starts again. 11. Rutherford B. Hayes, cornmeal mush with syrup. A saucepan of cornmeal and water turns into a soft steam-rising porridge that holds a thin ribbon of syrup on top. The texture is smooth by steady stirring. The finish is warm and plain on purpose. It's food that arrives without fanfare and leaves you quietly full. The method is frontier simple. Whisk to keep lumps away, cook until it relaxes, pour into a bowl, and add a little sweetness. In Ohio kitchens, corn and sorghum were reliable, inexpensive, and close at hand. The dish fit mornings before long rides or nights after long work. For Hayes, cornmeal mush recast frugality as a virtue, not a punishment. Proof that a modest pot, managed well, could steady a day as surely as any formal meal. It's the taste of practicality, heat, grain, and a trace of syrup tempering the rough edges. One spoonful tells a story of households that counted everything and wasted nothing, and of leadership that understood restraint not as lack but as choice. 12. Chester A. Arthur, roast mutton with mint jelly. A polished platter carries slices of rosy mutton, still fragrant from a slow, confident roast, with mint jelly shining in a cut glass dish nearby. The service looks like a hotel menu, white cloth, proper carving, the quiet drama of steam rising. The how is straightforward and exacting. Roast rare, rest well, slice thin, pair with a bright sauce that cuts richness. In the Gilded Age, this was the language of refinement, the taste of club dining rooms and grand hotels that set the tone for formal Washington suppers. For Arthur, who appreciated tailored suits and ceremony, roast mutton signaled civility and polish without drifting into excess. The meaning lands between appetite and etiquette, a gentleman's plate that expects good company and measured talk, that treats the table as a stage where small details matter. It's not fussy, it's composed. In every bite, you taste the confidence of an era that believed in proper cuts, proper service, and the calm pleasure of doing things the right way. Enter text. 14. Theodore Roosevelt, steak and coffee breakfast. A thick steak hits a hot pan at dawn, sears hard, and rests while black coffee steams in a tin-tough mug. The plate is bare on purpose: meat, salt, heat. No fuss, no lag. It's a Rough Rider morning, fuel, not theater. The method borrows from trail camps and ranch kitchens. Build a quick fire, sear fast, eat and move. For Roosevelt, who folded wilderness into statesmanship, this breakfast was energy made edible, a direct line from appetite to action. No sauces to slow him down, no ceremony to crowd the table. The meaning goes beyond protein. It's an ethic. Rise early, work hard, keep discipline, take your strength straight. You hear hoofbeats in the sizzle, feel pine air in the coffee's bite. In an office that often rewards caution, the breakfast says go. Vigor over dithering, clarity over garnish. Then the plate is cleared, the cup is drained, and the day charges forward with a grin only Roosevelt could get away with. 15. William Howard Taft, turtle soup. A deep bowl arrives with a dark, glossy broth layered with wine and aromatics, the kind of soup that announces a formal meal before a single knife is lifted. Where turtle was scarce or restricted, a careful mock version, veal, herbs, sherry, stood in with conviction. The technique is ceremony translated into cooking, a long, attentive simmer, strained clarity, a finishing splash of fortified wine, maybe a thin lemon slice to brighten. In the early 1900s, turtle soup meant the height of club dining and diplomatic hosting, a calling card for important tables. For Taft, who presided over grand entertainments, it symbolized hospitality at scale, rich without being reckless, traditional without being stodgy when well made. The meaning is about welcome and wait, guests settling into their seats, conversation warming as the broth does, a sense that the evening has begun properly. In an era that prized order and occasion, this bowl set the key, polished, confident, and ready for the courses, arguments, and agreements to follow. 16. Woodrow Wilson, chicken salad. Poached chicken cooled on porcelain platters, diced neat, folded into creamy mayonnaise with bits of crisp celery. It was tidy food for a tidy mind, the kind of dish that stayed cool under pressure. Prepared in advance, served in crisp lettuce cups, it fit the academic calm of Wilson's table. The method was precise. Simmer gently, chill completely, mix without excess. Early 20th century luncheons prized such control. For Wilson, it mirrored his personality. Reserved, deliberate, quietly confident. There was no pomp, no gravy, no grand gesture, just nourishment shaped by discipline. It tasted of order and restraint, of a man who preferred his meals, like his politics, composed and thoughtful. 17. Warren G. Harding. Cornbread and fried chicken. A skillet sang with the sound of oil as golden crust met cast iron, the air filled with that unmistakable scent, cornbread rising beside crisp chicken pieces browning deep. Harding called it home on a plate, a taste that reminded him of the road, rallies, and the Midwest towns that made him. It was pan-fried, plain, and perfect. Both cornmeal and chicken were staples of thrift and comfort, proof that normalcy could still feel rich if cooked right. Each meal said, "You can be powerful and still crave something humble." For Harding, it was the taste of reassurance, grease, bread, and belonging after a long day of shaking hands. 18. Calvin Coolidge. Apple pie with sharp cheddar. The pie was warm, the crust shimmering faintly with sugar, and the cheese, aged Vermont sharp, melted slightly from the heat. Coolidge liked it that way, plain and steady, the flavor more honest than sweet. The crust was lard-rich, rolled thin, baked golden. The apple filling, tart, never fancy, spoke of thrift, of Yankee kitchens that knew value in every peel. The cheddar on the side was tradition, not garnish. Apple pie without cheese, they said in Vermont, is like a kiss without a squeeze. For Coolidge, that old proverb fit. Simple pleasures done right, never loud, always true. A quiet indulgence for a quiet man who measured his words and his meals with care. 19. Herbert Hoover. Welsh rarebit toasted bread, thick and browned, under a molten stream of cheddar melted with mustard, beer, and a hint of spice. It looked rich, smelled comforting, and cost almost nothing. Rarebit was the Depression cook's trick. Cheese stretched thin, poured thick, turning scraps into supper. Hoover, unfairly tied to the hardship years, knew the irony of this comfort food rising during his watch. It was warmth you could afford, a way to make do and still eat with dignity. Simple stovetop chemistry, melt, whisk, pour, share. A reminder that not every table needed plenty to have pride. Sometimes, flavor and feeling were enough. 20. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Hot dogs and baked beans. The grill hissed and flared. A dozen hot dogs blistered over the flame while a pot of baked beans simmered beside them. It wasn't a gala meal. It was a gesture. Roosevelt once served this same backyard supper to visiting royalty, and the moment made headlines. No china, no formality, just picnic food from the heart of America. The beans were slow-baked with molasses, the hot dogs grilled until they popped. Simple, shared, democratic, exactly the image he wanted to send. It was a leader's way of saying, "We eat what our people eat." Each bite carried that message. Humility with flavor, warmth without wealth, hospitality with open hands. Up next, the Cold War tables, coffee shop breakfasts, and homey favorites that shaped modern presidential palates. 21. Harry S. Truman. Ozark buttermilk pie. A farmhouse custard takes shape from eggs, sugar, and tangy buttermilk, baked until the top bronzes and the center jiggles just a little. No fuss beyond a steady whisk and a hot oven. Simple steps that fit a Missouri kitchen. The ingredients were always close. Buttermilk from the churn, pantry sugar, a saved crust, or a buttered tin. It's a pie that tastes modest at first bite and then lingers, bright and comforting, like the lights of home after a long day. For Truman, it read as roots remembered in office. Plain sweetness balanced by a little twang, proof that the best endings can be humble and exactly right. 22. Dwight D. Eisenhower. Beef stew with vegetables. Lean cubes of beef brown in a pot, then go under with onion, carrots, and potatoes for a slow, patient simmer until the spoon meets tenderness and the broth turns sturdy. A shake of flour thickens. Time and heat do the rest. It's camp kitchen logic, the kind an army man carried into civilian life. Feed many, waste nothing, keep it simple. Grocers had the cuts. Gardens supplied the roots. The stove supplied discipline. For Eisenhower, this stew meant substance before ceremony, the quiet assurance of hot bowls that steadied a table and left a room ready for hard decisions. 23. John F. Kennedy, New England clam chowder. A milk-rich chowder warms in the pot, potatoes softening while salt pork lends depth and fresh clams turn the broth into the taste of a cold Atlantic morning. It's not elaborate, just a careful simmer and a steady hand so it stays creamy, not heavy. Fishmongers and fish piers made this possible. New England kitchens made it second nature. Served with crackers and a little pepper, it felt like Hyannis in any room. For Kennedy, chowder was home flavor amid glamour, salt and milk and potato reminding a modern presidency where it began, and why plain, well-made things can still command attention. C4. Lyndon B. Johnson, BBQ brisket and pinto beans. A long-smoked brisket yields to the knife, bark dark and fragrant, slices fanned beside a pot of beans stewed until they surrender. The method is time and smoke, low fire, patient tending, a cook's steady eye, beans seasoned by what the pantry allows. Texas ranch gatherings turned this into policy you could taste. Open pits, open invitations, talk that lasted until the stars were old. Butcher shops and backyard pits made the brisket. Beans stretched hospitality as far as the crowd required. For Johnson, this plate was political welcome in edible form, handshake smoke, neighborly beans, a promise that guests would leave full. 25. Richard Nixon, cottage cheese with pineapple. A chilled bowl of cottage cheese meets tidy cubes of pineapple, bright on white, served without ceremony, and finished in a few careful bites. It's a 1960s habit, light, quick, healthy before labels turned crowded, assembled from supermarket staples that fit a busy schedule. No stove, no weight, just a spoon and a plate. The choice makes sense for a man who kept complicated hours and preferred order on the table. For Nixon, it was simplicity from a complex life, a small routine that steadied the day, clean, cool, and private, like a breath taken between headlines. Across 2 centuries of kitchens, from hearths to modern stoves, the president's plates traced the country's path. Cornmeal and cod gave way to casseroles and canned fruit. Clubhouse luxuries softened into backyard cookouts. What stayed constant was the way dinner carried work and worry to a gentler place. A hoecake beside tea, a chowder that tasted like an Atlantic morning, a slow stew that made patience visible. Each bite was region and era, but also person. The foods didn't campaign, they endured. They told the truth about where someone came from and what they reached for when ceremony ended. You can hear the timeline in the methods as much as the flavors. Hearth bakes and shared ovens become hotel roasts, then tin mug coffee and pan-seared breakfasts, then smoke and grill marks in a backyard where power chose to look ordinary. Preservation jars and molasses barrels seed to delicatessen counters and picnics with paper plates. Some dishes sound grand in name, then sit humble in the bowl. Others look simple and do a complicated job. Steadiness in a spoon. Welcome on a platter. A reminder that hunger is solved one good decision at a time. If any of these plates surprised you, they're worth remembering not as curiosities but as bridges, linking public power to private hunger, policy to pantry. Which one would you share if you had to host a room full of strangers and make it feel like home? Which deserves a comeback at your table tonight? Tell us the meal you'd put forward, or the one your family already keeps alive. And if a favorite here stirred a story, pass it on. That's how food history lasts. One plate, one memory, one invitation to sit. Thank you for spending time at these tables. If you'd like more people-first food history from real lives and real kitchens, stay with us for the next episode, where the timeline keeps cooking and the stories keep getting passed. Historical best effort, sources noted in description, vintage cookbooks, newspapers, oral histories, archives,